Hey everyone, welcome to Forked.ai, your real estate investing AI podcast. Back this week with my good friend David Moses of Avenue Group Real Estate up in the Michigan area. And Dave, we were talking just a second ago. It has been a minute. We let too much time here lapse in between the last time we talked. I think just like summer schedules, and I traveled. I was in Eastern Europe for a couple years, and so we have been delinquent. But the world marches on, and much has changed, and a lot is happening. So we're gonna have a catch up episode here to get folks up to speed on what's been going on for the past month or so. So what's been going on with you, man? What is the latest in your AI progress?
Yeah, so my universe has pretty much been around, focusing on efficiencies, focusing on trying to figure out where the ball is getting dropped the most and try to fill that in. That really was my focus for a long time, getting workflows that read documents, workflows that understand, how to enter things, how to get data from one place and put it in another place in a complete and, fully detailed way. And I think we've done a pretty decent job of that. And then we kind of hit this wall where things got implemented, but didn't get like they got 90% there and not actually put out into the world. And then, we ran into these issues where if it didn't handle everything, we felt like it was not ready for deployment. So we've been working on workflows. We use the architecture we have, if you remember, is essentially we have Claude that is connected using these custom connectors that we built to our data. So basically our Mongo databases, and we created these workflows in N8N that allow Claude to just create API calls and fire them through directly to each of our CRMs and PMS systems and what have you.
Which is and you mirrored each of those in Mongo. You're analyzing the data that's within Mongo, but then the workflows will push directly back to the database to update that data, correct?
Correct. And that can be done in Claude. And then we also started building individual agents in Hermes. Originally it was OpenClaw. We kind of abandoned that because OpenClaw was not quite everything kept spilling over. Like you'd be in one thread trying to discuss a particular workflow, and there would be this kind of overflow from other things you were working on. And it would, there were times where it would just like completely dismantle a workflow, thinking that it was wrong because it thought the objective was this other, workflow, and it was clearly spillage over from another thread. So we use the communication is through Discord. And so that helps us organize each workflow or each kind of subject that we're working on into a separate thread, and then keep those things. The idea is to keep them siloed, but it wasn't working. So when we switched to Hermes, we found most of that just went away completely. It still had some context from, some cross workflow context. It was still learning things from the various threads that we were in, but it wouldn't like grab that context and use it in a particular prompt to try to update a workflow. And it was where it was working on the wrong workflow.
So explain to me I haven't played with Hermes yet. I've heard of the agents, but I haven't used them at all. So my understanding is, and I am building some foundation because I want to bring agents into the system yet, but we really haven't to speak of yet. But I've been hearing more about Hermes agents specifically. And my understanding is that you need to that you need to document your basically, I think it leads me to the conclusion that documenting systems and processes is back, because an agent needs context in order to perform a function. And so if you point an agent with no context at a workflow, it'll I use this it'll be like a 22-year-old. It'll be okay, But if you give it context and you give it like an SOP manual and it understands the vocabulary and understands the nature of the business, it'll probably do a pretty good job. So what have you seen?
Yeah, I think that's spot on. I would say that you write an SOP manual as though you are focused only on showing them what the right way to do things looks like. I've found it's very difficult for humans, I think, to train AI because we kind of operate, our focus is, oh my God, this is broken, something's wrong. The bear's going to eat me kind of, back of our brain kind of thing that we focus on the negative, but it's really difficult to train AI like that because AI knowing what not to do isn't as helpful. AI really needs to know what a successful end looks like, and it learns and performs significantly better when you focus it on, this is what an example of what a correct output would look like. And so that's been tricky. It's been really tricky to try to, build that into our agentic workflows. And because that's, I think Claude does a significantly, when we're on Hermes, we're using Chat 5.6 Sol, which is like, because we can tie it to the OAuth token and not pay for tokens. We don't wind up having to pay for, a ridiculous amount of tokens. It'll just use, it'll throttle it a little bit, but it'll work.
Are you so have you built up, how does Hermes work? Explain to me how it works. Like, are you writing all of your agentic workflows inside the Hermes software? Is that where you're doing the training? Or are you pointing your Hermes software at like an Obsidian vault with a bunch of notes in there? How does all that, how does it get the context?
So for building the workflows themselves, the platform we still use for the most part is N8N, but we are moving some workflows to just being Python scripts, right on our EC2 server. But in terms of the training part of it, like, how do we do things, so to speak? We use this kind of the architecture is this. You have a Mongo database that is our collection of knowledge about anything and everything that an agent would need to know or want to know to build our workflows. Like how to make this API call, what the endpoints are, what the deep link URL addresses, how they're formatted. And anything and everything, it lives in this Mongo collection. And each document, they call them documents, but each item in the collection has one field that is just a description, kind of like an MD file, but kind of stripped down. Just like here's an example, or here's a description of what this, what this knowledge, this piece of knowledge talks about. Yeah. And
Are we in Mongo or are we in Hermes right now?
Well, so this stuff, Hermes interacts with Mongo, and that's where it will reach into this knowledge library. And whenever it's trying to do something to get context on how to do what it's doing. So Mongo has a feature that allows one field in each document to be automatically embedded semantically. So basically it can do a semantic search of this particular field across all these documents and figure out which pieces of knowledge are relevant to what I'm trying to do. And then it can use those things, and that's how that's its like long-term memory. Right? It has its own, each agent has their own MD files and maintains their own kind of memory of what they've talked about. So that's like, it's just a series of MD files that it keeps just locally within the same, really on the same server that they live on. And then they have the context of the actual thread, the thread itself. So they can look through anything we've talked about in that specific Discord thread. And then it has this long-term vault of knowledge for how to build things. And the way that kind of knowledge vault works is after each session, or at least once a day, the agent will suggest, they'll actually submit to a workflow, they'll suggest new nuggets, new pieces of knowledge. And then there's another agent that will review all of those nuggets of knowledge to decide, is this something we don't already know? Like, is this something that's not already in our knowledge base? If so, if it's already in there, hey, we already have it. Is there any way that this new piece of knowledge enhances something we have? If so, it'll update it. Or is it something that is, brand new? And if it's something brand new, okay, first let's check that it's correct. And then if it's correct, it adds it in. So there's like separate workflow that kind of maintains our long-term knowledge that all of the agents can access. So all of the agents may have access to like, okay, here's how you go and find like all of our API keys live in a vault, right? Not every agent has permission to use them. How those permissions work and how to access them in the vault and what to look for. All the instructions are in Mongo. The vault is on something called Vault Warden. So that would be when an agent is saying, okay, I need to make this API call, and I don't know with my own sole MD file or whatever other MD files they have, I don't know inherently how to do this, so I need to go and find out. They go and they find out, and they learn, okay, I got to go to this vault, I got to search here, and that's essentially how that's how our long-term versus short-term memory works. It's not perfect by any means, but it does a good job of keeping things relatively consistent as you have multiple people working on creating and modifying and fixing workflows.
So where do you write the SOP to start with? Like how do you actually teach the agent what you want it to do and then teach it how to do that?
So how I do it now is I do it. So each person has their own agent, and each person, not everybody in the company, but each one of our leaders has their own agent. And so whatever they have to do, whatever process they're trying to accomplish, they simply tell their agent what they're trying to accomplish, and they kind of painfully walk through explaining it to the agent what the steps are, and they kind of just walk through doing it. And then the agent will actually go and do it. They'll try to make API calls to update certain fields. If it can't find a field because that endpoint doesn't exist or that endpoint doesn't deliver enough information for them to do what they need to do, it'll say, okay, here's what I'm missing. Here's what's missing. And then that becomes the part the human has to, like an example would be our agents for a long time, they couldn't go log into the bank account and download the bank statement. So that became, when the agent needs to look through the bank statement for, kind of pre-reconciliation purposes, or to try to identify, whatever it is, the workflow, whatever the agent was trying to do, we know, okay, well, somebody needed to go in and download the bank statement and save it here. That was the human part of it. And so that process of reconciling a bank account, let's say, had some agentic portions to it, and it had some human portions to it. But the way we kind of trained it, the way we kind of built the manual for it, was to literally walk through doing it with the agent, and the agent would remember every single step of it and figure out. I don't know that there's a better way around that, but I'd love to hear if there was. But by the agent figuring it out, there was this component to it that, we naturally went through the progression of figuring out what endpoints were available, what weren't, what data was there, what data wasn't there. All of that kind of happened organically through the process of building the SOP, because the agent could make a bunch of different calls correctly and incorrectly and pull a bunch of data from a bunch of different endpoints very, very quickly in order to figure out, okay, this is the right way. This is the right endpoint to use. This is the right place to go to get this data. And we wound up getting to where we wanted to get to significantly faster.
So you're taking the approach of these agents are really like a personal assistant for each of the chairs that you have in your organization.
Yes. And then it becomes, so the workflow candidates become the things that people do repetitively that the agent already knows how to do. So when you just say to an agent, hey, I need you to figure out why, look, I have an automation that it's a deterministic automation, does not have any agent involved in it. All it does is it takes an invoice that is submitted from a vendor through through Property Meld, which is like a portal for handling work orders at properties. They submit their invoice there, and the system just pulls out the work order and enters the invoice into QuickBooks. So in order to do that in QuickBooks, we have each owner that we manage for, or each entity that owns a property that we own, is a customer, and then each property that entity owns is a sub-customer. Each unit in that property is a sub-customer of that. And then each work order is a sub-customer of that. So all that has to be mapped to the IDs that are in AppFolio and the IDs that are in Property Meld. And so what this does is it kind
which you did in Mongo.
Which we did. We mirrored it. We mirrored all these things in Mongo, so it would only have to look one place to get all these IDs. But initially, we had to. Well, I guess way initially, we had to literally go and manually figure. This is the AppFolio ID for this property or this owner, whatever it was. So then we created this workflow that will automatically take the vendor. It does an API call to pull the vendor's invoice, which includes the unit ID, the work order ID, when I say ID, like the IDs that are in the system, not, our work order number. And it would feed that, it would basically match those up with what's in QuickBooks and then enter the invoice and attach it in. And so it could be paid out of QuickBooks. And we have an agent that oversees that. And then the agent, whenever that workflow fails, the agent says, okay, well, what's going on here? Oh, this is a new unit, or, oh, this is a new vendor. And then it knows to build knows how to create the sub-customer in QuickBooks or create the vendor in QuickBooks or do whatever, fill in whatever is missing. And so that became the candidate for, because that was actually built before. It was built by AI, but it was built before Agentic AI really existed in N8N. These were just deterministic workflows that were, dumb workflows. But now we have an agent, and we just say to the agent, hey, go and figure out what's broken whenever you get an error. Go in and figure out what's broken. And we would walk through it would look and see, okay, well, it's missing a QuickBooks ID. Here's who's missing the QuickBooks ID. It's this unit, it's this work order, it's this whatever's missing a QuickBooks ID. And then it knows how to fill in those blanks. So because the agent knows how to do that, now we've created, we're creating a workflow or augmenting that first workflow just to say, when this ID is missing, like we know what the mistakes are. So when this ID is missing, this is how you fill it all in.
Fascinated. Are you building, does each agent know what the other agents are doing? Or are they all silos?
And this is, I guess, a drawback to Hermes, but they are all siloed. Not that they can't, quote unquote, talk to each other, because they can see, if they're given permission to see, they can see the interactions the other agents have with everything. But the way Hermes kind of builds it is the agents are fairly well siloed. It is they can create their own sub agents and that whole ecosystem of agent and all their sub agents is clean and consistent and works really well. But once you have, you don't have a lot of one agent learning from another or understanding what another's, kind of work through. That's probably a good thing to augment in the future, is at least the ability when an agent gets stuck on something to at least be able to ask the question, to the other agents to say, how do I do this? Right now, it has that knowledge base that I talked about. That is a shared knowledge base, and it's a permissioned knowledge base too. So it knows, hey, if you're an agent for this, these agents have these permissions, these agents don't. Which it's just my leadership team right now. So they're really the only things that are, siloed in terms of permissions from the knowledge base are things that are for me personally.
Are you setting up like cron jobs so like they're doing a certain task on a daily, weekly, hourly webhook basis?
Yes, they, most of our repetitive workflows are done in N8N, and they're on schedules. It's just more robust. It's more, but now we have the one, like our mirror workflow is just a Python script on a cron job. But the agents do have, like I have an agent that will go into because it's on a Mac. So I put I attached my Apple ID into the Mac. So it actually looks through my photos to see if I have any receipts and pulls them out, reads them, figures out what they're for, and either, creates a reimbursement request or my agent just knows how to do that. And he checks once a day to see if there are any receipts. He keeps my personal books. He'll attach it to whatever card in QuickBooks, find the transaction in QuickBooks and literally upload, because I do my personal stuff in QuickBooks. So it uploads that receipt to that transaction in QuickBooks. And it's pretty cool. I think I have mine pretty well built out. I'm just trying to encourage my team to do the same. Like you use it for personal stuff. It'll look through my WhatsApp messages. It looks through my, it'll tell me if I haven't responded to someone important in a, you know, in a certain period of time. Like the other day when you sent me a text message and I didn't respond for a while. Actually, Rufus, my agent, actually sent me a text message. Hey, Jack sent you a message and you never responded. And that's actually how I figured out that I forgot to respond to you.
Man, this is really interesting. So like this is really like, this is your new OpenClaw. It's just got a little bit, a little bit tighter guardrails on it, and guardrails enough that you're very comfortable giving it write access to all of your source databases.
Yeah, it is. Look, I think prompt injection is a real thing. I think that there are a lot of security type concerns, but I think for every security concern that it raises, there are at least two that it solves. And I mean that by like, my agent operating on Sol 5.6 can read an email and know that it's a phishing email better than Microsoft systems can.
Yeah, I hear that. Yeah.
And there are, when I see when I get an alert that there's been a login in my Netflix, it knows not to tell me that. It knows I don't no one cares.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when it detects that there's been a login in my bank account, and it knows I'm up north, it literally sent me a message saying there's a login in your bank account from a new IP address, and I know you're out of town. Is that you? So I feel like there are some things that it solves there are some security type things that it solves that are much more practical and real to me than some of the, kind of abstract sorts of potential risks that it raises.
Man, that's super interesting. Okay, so I'm trying to attack the same problem. I want to get agents into my workflows to handle the easy stuff, right? The stuff that's just like very, well, anything that's like purely if then statements should just be an automation, right? And then the things just above that where like the patterns are very clear and or like there's a lot of like just diligent legwork that needs to happen. I don't want to pay a human to do that. I think an agent can do that, frankly, just better and cheaper, faster, better and cheaper. So here's the way that I'm attacking it. So we are putting Salesforce is our system of record. And so it's all my data points are in Salesforce. You've got your equivalent of Mongo. For me, that's Salesforce. So everything's defined in Salesforce. That's where that's where all the fields are defined. And in those field definitions, we are backfilling, a little bit of the description, right? A little more context, right? Trying everywhere to give it a little bit more context, right? Like, so that it's just not, because it'll make an assumption, right? If it's called loan amount, it assumes, it knows something about that. But if the field ID or the descriptor ID is something vague or, doesn't fully understand it, it can make more mistakes, right? So we're trying to like bulk up the description of even the field definitions. And then on top of that, I've got kind of like object, right? Like all my concepts. So a lead comes in. It's basically anything in an object-oriented software that is defined by an object, right? So a lead comes in, a quote gets created, an opportunity gets created, for us, a loan object gets created. I've got a sale of a portfolio of loans. All of those objects get defined. And so we're going in and we're providing more context to the nature of basically the nature of the business and the different concepts memorialized by objects in my Salesforce architecture. And that's another set of markdown files. And obviously those objects have the fields associated with them. So those relationships can now be understood because the object has some description and the fields have description, and these fields sit on those objects. So now the agent knows a little bit more, right? Mm-hmm. And then on top of that, now I want to define roles. So I've got whatever, I've got a loan officer, I've got a loan officer assistant, I've got a loan processor, I've got an application review specialist, a mortgage pricing specialist. All of those are roles that I have defined in the context of my business. And they interact with certain objects and fields. So I've mapped all of the roles. I just literally uploaded my org chart and was like, here's my org chart. Here's all the humans. You see them as users in the Salesforce database. Map this org chart to those users and make sure that everything reconciles, right? Like, tell me where you see any mismatches. And so there was, a couple of mismatches and some titles needed to be updated, right? So now I've got, I've got my roles defined also in Markdown objects. And then on top of that, then I'm putting my SOPs on top of that, right? So I feel like I'm building like a pyramid, right? Like, so I've got my SOPs, which are what the things that the roles do. And at the moment, we are in the process of redefining a lot of systems or a lot of processes, right? Because I'm now able to write our own custom software. So like, everything that we did before, 6 months from now, we're doing it slightly differently, with all the data entry eliminated and all the automations that can be built, all the APIs sucking that information in directly, as opposed to going to websites and collecting information, just bringing it all and presenting it in one place, right? So that actually dramatically changes the SOP, right? Because before it's go to this website, and now it's the data is just presented to you. So I could just delete, I could just delete, so I'm going through the SOPs that we currently have. And like every time there's a verb that uses a computer, creating, just pulling that data in and just delete it, delete that sentence from the SOPs. And so then I'm at the end of this. This is going to be a many month process. But the idea is at the end of this, my new SOPs with all the redactions of all, of the automations and things that I've built will be much smaller, and they will only be the things that humans do, right? Like only the things that require a human will be the resultant SOPs. And anything that's like basic, like, I don't know, kind of like a basic analysis or, logic, that I can either be hard coded into an automation or executed by an agent because, the business logic is like pretty well defined. And so I'll have a set of agentic SOPs that do all the busy work. And then I'll have a resultant list of human SOPs. And then you plug in humans to the resultant list of SOPs. And so that SOP layer is right now in flux, and it's going to be in flux significantly, I think, for the next 6 months. And then I top down just wrote just talked about the business, right? I just gave it like, here's our history, here's our business philosophy, here's our credit, philosophy on credit, here's how we see the macro backdrop, here's some things that we've learned over the years, and just trying to give it as much business context as possible. The idea being that any agents that we do put into these workflows will now have down to the nitty gritty detail, data record level context up to the where we think interest rates are going, basically. And if it has all that context and everything in between, the resultant work that it should do should be pretty damn good. And so I'm going from at the moment, I'm not giving anybody agents. I'm trying to build this pyramid such that I can start grabbing SOPs at the end and creating job descriptions basically that are just purely agentic. And then redefining the job descriptions of what my people do as purely human things that don't have any agentic, or that are best done by humans. I'll put it that way.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that's been my approach to the problem. It's like and all of that is memorialized in Markdown files that are within our Salesforce system, because that's where that is our database. So that's our approach to it. I'm really curious about whether I'm like trying to build a castle too big, like too big of a castle all at once, and I should be getting my hands dirty a little bit with agents in the meantime and learning. So you're giving me some pause here on my approach. But anyway, that's what we're doing. That's where we're biting off right now.
So your organization, how many people total?
160.
And then when you add in, the people that have to regularly interact, with, with the company, like when how many customers, how many vendors?
250 loans a month.
Okay. So I would say you have like two things. Number one, I wonder, I don't know if you have the time for it, but it might be cool to kind of think about starting like a a digital twin on the kind of like on the outside of the organization, and under the premise, basically just say, okay, if I were starting the company from scratch based solely on, like, I'm going to make it a purely agentic, purely digital company, right? Understanding that it's not there yet. Like, we know that agents, it gets smarter every day. It seems it gets every week it gets smarter, but it's not there yet where you can have a completely agentically run lending company. It's highly unlikely. So
Well, yeah, the problem is the thing is the customers, right? Like in theory, you could. It just when you look at the pipeline and like because we've like dabbled with this idea. The problem is that like the percentage of the pipeline that could go through without ever having to speak to a human. I just think that everyone overestimates how big of a percentage that it is. I think it's just a tiny percentage, right? Like, so like what
you
I'm
mean buy-in
building
from the customer
could,
side, because there's not
um,
buy-in.
the world's just not that clean. I don't know. The world's just not that clean. Everyone's got a little bit of a situation, a little bit of a tweak. The documentation isn't quite correct. Things change, just like, we need to orchestrate a pivot. And like at some point along the loan process, everyone needs a little bit of critical thinking and problem solving. And it's just like in theory, yes, if I had an ideal customer and a very, who completely 100% had their shit together and they had a very cookie cutter vanilla deal and everything came in clean and the title company did their job. Like it just doesn't happen. Like it just never lines up that way. So like I'm building all the pieces such that like when that piece comes in and that piece gets clean, it just happens, right? Like if a piece will get clean, but I don't believe that I could ever actually create, well, sorry, with this generation, right? At the moment, I don't think I'm like could replace a job description even. I can't even replace a job description. I'm just taking chunks of the pipeline off the table that are like box check, like check process, right? Like I just
Easy
won't have
stuff.
a human. I won't need a human to go check process. But dude, that's like 1 in 10 files for them, right? And for each job description, it's different files, right? Like a step goes cleanly for this guy on this file and then gets held up for 2 weeks over in the next phase, and then or vice versa.
Mhm.
So like I don't think that a purely agentic lending company would be very successful. I
I
think
don't think
you'd
so either. And I don't think the question is whether it would be successful now. The question is whether it'll get there. Like whether 2 years down the road it would be there. But I think the
Well, so what
exercise.
I'm building though, like what I'm building though is the idea is that it is an agentic lending company. Like every component of our business that can be done by AI and agents, it can or is done by AI and agents. But then but in every step, I still have we need to speak to a human, and so I'm gonna and so none of my humans are going anywhere. Like I need all of them. I'm just hoping that we can handle 50 or 100% more capacity with the same people because the easy stuff just runs through, and that everybody else ends up doing the hard work on the hard files.
So yeah, I mean and the hard work is
Critical thinking, problem solving, pivoting, judgment, just like risk analysis and judgment. And there's a ton of that.
the
There's
hard
that
work
in
is
every
not.
phase.
But is that the time consuming work? Like that's the hard work. That's the difficult work. That's the stuff that really takes, expertise, experience, intelligence, but it doesn't, but is that the stuff like, so I
Well,
did,
but my hope is that they spend the extra time doing that well, right? Like, hey, when you're just trying to like shuffle files through, sometimes you just get a little lazy because you're busy and you don't pick up the phone and have that 25-minute conversation that you should to make sure you make the optimal risk judgment call for the company. And you just shuffle it through and pass it along, and I'm hoping that this extra time allows them to spend the appropriate amount of energy on the high value tasks. And I still think that there'll be a net savings of time so that we could handle more business with the same team, but I'm hoping it is both like faster for the customer and a higher quality work product all around, right? Like better customer experience and better risk management decision and faster process because we're using better tools to, where they make sense and not, where they make sense and only where they make sense.
So what's the first customer facing thing you're going to, or do you already have one that's agentic, that is customer facing? Like this is an agentic, workflow or
Just launched,
something.
yeah.
What's that?
Yeah, so like right now when you submit a DSCR application, like literally just now in the past like 2 weeks, like when you go, you can go online and you can start your DSCR application online and instantly get a quote on your DSCR loan, which is not agentic. That's just an API. Like that's just sending data to a pricing engine and pulling data back. And then you can say like, yep, let's move forward. And you can swipe your credit card. Again, none of this is AI. And then you can actually start uploading documents and you can get instant feedback on those documents that like, hey, you're missing a signature on page 7 of your operating agreement or whatever.
Cool. Yeah.
That is agentic. That is OCR and then analysis by an agent. And so the new borrower portal that we just put out there has doc analysis and really underwriting built into it. And so that our people are then only just reviewing exceptions, right? If the operating agreement looks good, they don't even click on it. There's the operating agreement thumbs up. We're like, great. We're not even going to click on that PDF. We're only clicking on the red boxes and the yellow question marks,
Yeah. And that has it already sped up the process?
Like it's literally like 2 weeks out. I mean, it's got to, like it should, if the people use it. I mean, dude, for a long time, we were testing stuff alongside people and we were like, hey, you know what? Believe it, right? Just like send if the underwriting tool says that the loan file is good, just send it through, dude. 40 of the team just couldn't. Like they still clicked on the PDF. I said, don't click on that PDF, and the next day they were just like, I'm gonna click on that PDF. Like this, they just couldn't bring themselves to actually trusting the thing. So like this trust building process is going to be really a big part of this. Like we're
That's honestly that's where the agents have helped my leadership team the most, is that like they would just innately go look for a document in a folder, which with our folder system, with our file system over the last, decade, 2 decades, whatever, that could be a lengthy endeavor, even if everything is where it's supposed to be. Let's just assume for a moment that the document's not exactly where it's supposed to be, or someone created a folder and named it this instead of that. Let's just, operate under the assumption that humans were involved at most of this. And just that's what they would do. They're automatically their mind would go to, and when I gave them the agent, I was like, stop looking for things. Okay. Just don't, you need to look for emails. You need to look for files that are in folders. You need to look for all these things. Stop looking for it. Just ask the agent, see if the agent can find it for you. And lo and behold, that because they were able to just ask and get an answer, it was, they began to then, it was kind of like the back door to trust for them. It was like, I've got something I've got to solve. I know this is a problem. How can the agent help me? And then they would just ask the question. And then I feel like they're getting to the point now where they know when to trust and when to question, which I think is really important. When you have deterministic workflows, you can trust them. You should trust them. It's not worth your time to not trust them. When you have agentic workflows, there are things that it will miss. 1 out of 50, 1 out of, there are things that it will miss. And knowing when to trust it and when not to trust it, and knowing what outputs, that it gives you that you can rely on or not. God, there's like a feel for it. It's almost like it's not just obviously wrong anymore. It used to be like it would just give you, I would just type in a prompt and it would tell me something and I was like, that's, I would just know. Now it's much more subtle, but my fear is that people who are getting involved in it now and learning now are never going to be obvious. And because it's the obvious, they're going to miss the really subtle. So
yeah, I hear that.
So I felt like the agent, because they're asking the agent questions that they absolutely know how to do it themselves. They know what they're looking for. They know where to find it. And so when the agent says, I can't find it, I looked here, 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 the person knows, well, you looked in the wrong freaking place. It's not there. It's over in this. And so, I'm hoping that will kind of train both the agent and the human. What for the human, it's what can you trust the agent to do, and what do you need to teach the agent? And the agent, it's what do you need to learn? What does success look like? And then having it be fun. Having it be, like I gave every single agent the personality of the human's, like, favorite TV show or movie or whatever. So it would like respond like mine is Rufus, and he responds like George Carlin's character from Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. And so he'll say like most excellent, and he'll say and he'll come up with things that you would think Rufus might say, and it makes it
That's hilarious.
it's silly, but it makes it fun. And like that's the thing, they make it fun and give it, and just kind of the default should be ask the agent. Ask the agent, right? Because imagine this is a real human. You're not just going to go do things yourself when you have an assistant. They're sitting there. They're waiting for things to do. If you don't give them things to do, even if it's not your money paying them, you're going to feel like money's being wasted. You're going to, like that person sitting there saying, hey, how can I help? And you're not utilizing their help. You're going to feel wasteful. And think of the agent that way. Like anything that the agent can do for you, you should be asking the agent. Now, at the leadership level, they have a lot of access. How you push that down the levels where you need to start, really kind of getting specific with what they can and can't see. You don't want the agent to be able to like, hey, go look at Jack's email and, tell me if he's pissed off at anybody. You don't want to pull that.
Well, so like, I'm curious, like you've been using agents with your more senior people. Have you had any agents actually doing like block and tackling work, and why not? I might argue that like, the person who's, the $65,000 white collar person probably has the most use for an agent helping them to perform their daily functions. Have you pushed it down to that level yet, or replaced any workflows at that level yet?
Not yet. No, I don't have any agents beneath my leadership team level. Not yet. Not
Any
that
reason? Concern, or is it like a concern about a particular thing, or
besides Carl, but Carl's my brother, and he's working on AI workflows, so he has to have access to everything, and I completely trust him. So that part is, but everybody else, there's no real good reason. I just haven't gotten there yet. But it is to some degree. My organization's not huge. It's not, it's not a gigantic organization. So I may not actually get to the point where I create one agent for each person. It may be more like one agent for a specific department, where I'll have all of my community managers will have a community manager assistant agent. And it just saves me on, this is what they can access, this is what they can't access, because I only have to build it out for one agent. And I only have to monitor one agent to make sure that, things aren't, that they're not able to access things that they shouldn't access. So, and I also don't know that it's absolutely necessary to have, like if everybody is talking to, Claudette in my, like if everybody's talking, like I've got an agent called Rhoda. And I guess Rhoda is rolled out because I do have one VA that can actually communicate with Rhoda, the agent. And Rhoda can go into, it's an agent that is financial, so it's in QuickBooks. So they can go through and pre-reconcile bank accounts. They can tell, which bank accounts have been reconciled through what dates. They can say, they can look at what transactions were applied to the wrong class or no class at all, or the wrong division or no division at all, those types of things. And, I don't know how helpful it's been for her. It's only been a couple of weeks, but so I guess I will augment my prior response and say I have rolled it out at least to one person who's not at the leadership team level.
Are you've mentioned QuickBooks a number of times and talking about like the different workflows that you've created. Are they actually bookkeeping? Like, is an agent actually bookkeeping for you?
For me personally, yes.
For you personally?
Yes. For me personally, all my bookkeeping is done by my agent. Beyond that, we manage the books of, dozens of
When you
associations.
say for you personally, you mean for Avenue Group Real Estate?
No, for me personally, my personal, like my personal bank account, my personal credit cards, my personal stuff. Like it will look at all my receipts, my emails, everything, and it will categorize everything that needs to be categorized. It can see when I transfer money in or get a transfer from a bank account, it knows what bank account that is. It knows, hey, apply this as a contribution or a distribution, whatever it is from that particular entity. So my
So
personal bookkeeping is done.
it's like you have a personal QuickBooks account.
Yeah, I have a QuickBooks account that's just my personal books because I haven't found any other personal financial software that can handle a balance sheet. Like they just don't have balance sheets. It's just like, your car, your house, and all your
Yeah.
securities, but nothing else.
It's really interesting. I don't do that, but it's really interesting. I mean, it makes sense. Makes a ton of sense. I get it. Why not? It's like basically like you can print and then that's your PFS. You
Yeah.
can press print on your QuickBooks and that's your PFS.
I can't. I wouldn't do that because I'm in real estate, and so it's going to give the book value of all my real estate.
Yeah. No,
it
book. Yeah, it's your book. Yeah, it's your book PFS. Yeah,
yeah, it's correct. Yes,
cool. And then you mark to market.
Yes, exactly. I haven't figured that part out yet, but I'm sure I can do it and just do a journal entry that's a mark to market journal entry. I can actually get my, but it does. I actually am live working on my PFS as a separate workflow, so it will basically maintain, like it'll look every day and see what the rents are, which units are vacant, so it'll have all my, like if I sold a property, if the buildings of a specific, like an appfolio, it'll run a balance sheet. And if the buildings of a particular property are zero, then it knows that property, I don't own it anymore for whatever reason. So, don't put it, take it off the PFS. I'm building that out now. I haven't finished it yet.
But you haven't done, but Avenue Group Real Estate, you haven't had it do bookkeeping there yet. You haven't had any of the agents do bookkeeping there yet.
Not Avenue Group Real Estate. What it does do though, so we have like a few dozen communities that we manage the books for, HOAs, so forth. So every document gets processed now through an agentic workflow. And even though there's a human who actually clicks the button to put it into the books, it will figure out what it's for. It'll figure out if it's associated with a work order, like a vendor bill that's associated with a work order. It'll associate the work order. It'll figure out what GL account to put it to based on, that it looks at that vendor, all the, previous bills from that vendor for all the communities. It'll look through because each community has its own GL account, the chart of accounts. So it'll look through and it'll identify and almost 100% accurately identify the right GL account. It'll identify the right bank account. So if what they are paying for is a capital improvement and they want it to come out of their capital improvement bank account, or they have a special account for like a roof replacement or something like that, it'll guess correctly the bank account that it comes out of, and it will go to the manager to approve and the accounting, our accounting person to approve. And when they both click approve, it enters the new. So in a sense, it's doing the bookkeeping. It's just not the last leg, right? There's a person who clicks on it and says, yes,
That's amazing.
Correct. So, and then what's really cool about it isn't like that part of it doesn't take all that long, because it doesn't take all that long. They do make, like, accounting people do make mistakes. This doesn't really make mistakes anywhere near the level that they were making mistakes. And I mean, maybe they would make mistakes like 4 out of 100. This makes mistakes like, 1 out of 1,000, and they're very predictable, very obvious mistakes. So, but it just does wonderful things in terms of detail. Like as an example, if there's a utility bill that has gas and electric on it, separates those things out. If there's a bill,
how does it input the data? Do you just give it like online access to the utility account and say like, hey, on the first of the month, go in there and like look at all the PDFs and pull it down? And
we either scan or save the bill. We either scan it. So some human needs to either open the mail and scan it in and then the workflow takes it from there. Everything that comes into a particular email address, move it from there. Or it's something where they have to save it to a folder, or save it and forward it to that email address. Either of those things will work, and it will pull it and process it. And then basically categorize it, code it, figure out what community it's for, figure out whatever it is, right? So that's all working pretty well, but it's so much more detailed. Like if it has utility bill, a $5 processing fee or service fee or late fee or whatever, it breaks that out.
Does it?
And it'll catch things in the bill that people weren't catching. Like, hey, this bill has a spike in usage, or this bill has no usage at all, and like those things on a water bill, like that's an indication that someone's not living there if it's a zero water bill or very, very low usage, and then the other side, if it's a spike, it could be an indication there's a leak. And that's the kind of stuff where, as the manager, like we're responsible for catching that stuff. And so now it can, through this whole process, it'll catch it. And then our first customer facing dashboard will be to the treasurers of these communities that we manage, where they can get the dashboard. They can see all their documents. They can see a description and like all the analysis that was done on each document. Like there are a series of questions that we ask. If it's a utility bill, it'll give us interesting tidbits. Hey, the last utility bill was this much. The usage was this much. The previous year, same period was this much.
Is that a Hermes?
That is a mostly deterministic workflow.
I was going to ask, okay, or would you hard code all that business logic in? Is that so? It's an N8N flow.
It's an N8N flow, and it is, but it does have an agentic component to it because the agent is the one that makes
Looking back.
Yeah, that makes the final decision on the GL code and the bank account. Those are the two key things. But Carl, my brother does a pretty good job of keeping the tokens efficient. Not so much for the cost because it's not really that expensive, but for the speed. The workflows go a lot faster if he kind of like has these deterministic parts of the workflow that narrow things down for the agent. So the agent's only picking from, so it's not picking from every GL account that's in our EMS. It's only picking from the GL accounts that are available for that, that are of that type and available for that community. Things like that, which kind of narrows it down.
Yeah, that's really interesting. We've found that like for like the complex logic systems, like adding some rule-based component to the prompts really helps with speed and hallucination, right? Like you said, it just narrows it down. Like using some things like it doesn't have to run through like the entire menu of possible options because it's narrowed it down to 4. Gets one of 4 wrong, much fewer than if it's analyzing 25 ideas.
Yeah, that's right. But you have, like we have the same thing. You have so many examples of a human making a decision on how to code an invoice that the agent, as long as you just narrow down, hey, this was the vendor, this was the community, and then here's a description of what this bill was, right? It'll code it pretty damn well by giving it those, by giving it access to those correct examples. I mean, it's wildly accurate. I have yet to come up with a mistake that it made that wasn't either 1, a scanning error, or 2, a reasonable judgment call that I would have made a different call. Mm-hmm. Where it coded something, it said something was a repair, like maybe only part of the roof was replaced. Mm-hmm. So it called it a repair, and it's like, or it called it an improvement, and I mean, like, man, maybe I would have called that a repair. I probably wouldn't have called that improvement. But like, those are judgment calls. Those are not, those aren't things where the agent said it was a
sort plumbing. Yeah.
Those are things I can live with. In terms of, but yeah, that, like I said earlier, the positive example, like giving it, here's what success looks like, is so much more effective than telling it what it's doing wrong. That I just, it's almost like you don't give it, it's like if I say, don't think about an elephant, right? It's like, what are you thinking of? You're thinking of an elephant, right? Like this, it's almost impossible for you not to think of the thing, and that's like how the human brain works. It's pretty similar to how these neural networks actually function too. It's like if you focus it onto the mistakes it's making or the then it's not going to perform as well as if you focus it on the actual, it's like if you're, it was an analogy. I'm trying to remember who said it. I think it was Simon Sinek. He was talking about, when a downhill skier, right? Or a cross country skier, if you focus on, if you're looking at the trees, you're going to hit the trees, right? Focus on the path through the trees and don't look at the trees, you'll get through just fine.
Gotcha.
And that's essentially the same thing. You just have to, don't focus it on the mistakes, to say avoid this or avoid that. It's focus it on here's what correct looks like.
Super interesting. All right, David, it was that time went very quickly. It's a pleasure as always. I got to get back out there, get back into it.
All right.
So, hey, I'm looking forward to it. I will talk to you very soon.
What are you going to work on for next week?
What am I working on for next week? I'm picking up some projects in our property management and real estate side of things. So essentially, like I need to connect my pipeline management, property management, and construction management softwares together into, I'm using Postgres instead of Mongo, but into something, a data lake that is similar to what you have done, and making sure that all those APIs are plugged up correctly and that the business logic, that the system understands the business logic of real estate as it goes through the pipeline, so that I can start to plug, I think really, trying to walk a version of the path that you are in terms of being able to have agents help with the bookkeeping, help with pre-coding stuff, identifying errors in the system, making sure a house doesn't get left behind because someone just missed an email, and I lose 2 weeks because someone hasn't thought about that address in the past 2 weeks because they missed an email and it fell off of a report. Just trying to tighten all those, get those systems talking to each other and start to tighten up all those things. Like right now, I literally do a bi-weekly audit of those 3 systems against each other in a meeting of like 4 people. And that's what we do, and it's, it serves to also keep us on the same page with respect to all the inventory because we go address by address. But, that's not a super efficient, but it ends up, we that's what keeps us from like letting balls drop. But if I miss one of those meetings, it's a problem because, then I go a month without that. And then those, when a ball drops, it starts to get pretty expensive. So anyway, I've got this vision of a system that links that links those 3 systems together in a database. And then I think I need to bust out a Hermes agent and and start playing with it, because I kind of left my OpenClaw behind. I haven't touched it much in the past like 6 weeks.
You can ask your OpenClaw agent to build your Hermes agent.
Oh yeah,
that's what I did, and it did a great job.
It won't hurt its feelings. It'll be okay with it.
It will. Just I just told it, hey, I'm not sunsetting you. You're gonna still get, all the compute you want. You're gonna be super happy when this is, But
and then you downgraded it to an inferior token, an inferior API token.
So you're focused, like. And you probably get a lot more leeway. Like the stakes are lower there, right? I mean, like the money might be, high in terms of what you can save or what you can make on that part of it. But if you screw something up, there's no client. Like there's your properties, right?
Yeah. And I'm still going to run it manual myself in the meantime, right? I'm trying to make some of my processes redundant through I don't know, custom software and agents. Yeah.
Yeah, bust out that Hermes agent. You're going to be very, very happy. I'm gonna see if I can do some show and tell on that condo, the condo documents, the invoicing, so I can.
Oh yeah.
I'll show it to you next week, and you can critique it and tell me, hey, well, it'd be cool to do this, be cool to do that.
Excellent.
And I'll have it ready for us to look at. It's probably ready now.
Excellent. All right, guys. Sounds good. Hope everyone got something out of that. Thanks for tuning in to Forked.ai. Hope everyone has a great week. See ya.
Thanks. Take care.